Hello, hello, hello. Hello, guys. We are back at it with another stream. Right. Right. Got a haircut yesterday. Feel nice now. Feel nice. Feeling nice. Right, we turn on a few music. Focus. Hocus pocus. Hocus pocus. Focus pocus.
Doing comparisons. So when someone searches, we can do a comparison against the search query and what's in the DOM collection. Fantastic. So great job on that, and I will see you in the next screencast.
I have to rewatch this. Got me to keep it.
Hey there, coders, and welcome to the Essential JavaScript Concepts module. It's time to ratchet up the JavaScript complexity just a bit. You're going to learn some really practical JavaScript skills while building some frequently web page elements that are critical to most websites.
Essential JavaScript concept.
This module includes not one, but 4 projects. Firstly, we'll build a modal box. Modals are boxes which appear on top of other content with some kind of message or call to action. Then we'll build a search box. Next, a carousel for displaying sequences of images. And lastly, this super cool dice game. And your teachers for this course are Carl Hadwin, who's a highly experienced developer and teacher. And for the dice game, it's none other than Scrimba's very own CEO, Per Borgen. Why not head over to Scrimba's Discord server and let people know that you're about to get going?
Think of passion, pain. The name's in my name. Right, we go to the directly. Where's it? Started for this, not that one. We are at the search bar, yes. Oh, build a search bar overview. I have to watch the overview back so that I will understand what the, because there's a few things that I'm a little bit confused about the search bar.
Hello and welcome. I am super excited to bring you these screencasts where we're going to be building a search bar to find users. So this is what we're going to be building here on the right. We are going to do search bar on the top. Once you type into the search box, so for example, if I type Carl in there, it's going to bring back Carl as a result. If I type K in there, it's going to bring back Carl Katie. So it's going to do a partial match until it finds the full word. So we have to think about how we're going to handle user events. So when a user types in the search box, we have to attach an event listener. So we have to listen for changes on that search box. So there's a few things to think about. How do we use and well, how does this translate to JavaScript? Well, in real life, in quotes, we do events every day, whether that be opening a door, closing a door, turning on a light, waking up in the morning, getting dressed. All these tasks we do subconsciously every day. But if we're, for example, turning on a light, in the mechanism of a light, it's capturing it. In JavaScript, these are called key up and key down. So if you key down, capture events such as keyboard down, as in a user pressing down on the keyboard, and keyboard up. In JavaScript, these are called key up and key down. So if you key down, you can use key down and key up. So as soon as a user lifts their finger off the keyboard, we can capture that event. Secondly, we also have to think about how we can get all the current names from the DOM. So we have a list of names in our index.html file, and this essentially is what we're going to be searching through. So when a user goes and types a name into the search box, such as Carl, we grab that name, we store that name, and then we do a comparison through all the names. We have to make sure that both names, so when we're doing a comparison, we have to search through all the names, and the user search query, we have to make sure both of those are lowercase, so that when we're doing a comparison, we're not doing a comparison against Carl with an uppercase K and a lowercase Carl. So lastly, we have to, as mentioned, make sure that we loop for all the names and we check for the user's query. If that query exists, we show just that one result. If it happens to be KA and you have Carl and Katie there, well, you show both results. So each time a user searches, we do a comparison. If we don't find a match, we don't show that particular name. So here's an example of me searching for Carl, and it's found a full match, so it shows just Carl. So it's time to build. Let's jump in and we can get started. Okay, so in this screencast, I just want to take a quick time out and show you how events work within JavaScript. So we're going to be using this going forward because we do want to grab the value that the user typed into our search box. So I'm going to demonstrate here how basically we can use an event listener and we can attach a event such as key up or key down, but in this case it's going to be key up. So when the user keys up off the keyboard, we then run our function. The function that gets ran when it comes to event listeners, we can do whatever we like, but it does give us an event. Now, I want to just take a second to go over the task and the objectives. So we want to create an event listener for key up for our input field. So we have an input field right here. So with our input field, we want to access the event's target and value. So what we want to do first is get our input field by its ID of username input, and that's right here. So we have an ID. That ID is username input, and we want to access it. So to do that, we're going to, go ahead and what would we do? Get element by ID, right? So once you've got that particular element by its ID, we want to create a let inside, which is going to be called username. And we want to assign the username to event.target.value. But one of the things you have to be aware of is that when you get to the second parameter, so on an event listener, such as add event listener, you can pass key up, and then you'll have a function here. And generally speaking, you may just see one like this, but you do get an event out of here. So what you want to do is you want to use that event and access a property called target. Now the event has a bunch of properties and methods on there. Do get element by ID, right? So once you've got that particular element by its ID, we want to create a let inside, which is going to be called username. And we want to assign the username to event.target.value. One of the things you have to be aware of is that when you get to the second parameter, so on an event listener, such as add event listener, you can pass key up, and then you'll have a function here. And generally speaking, you may just see one like this, but you do get an event out of here. So what you want to do is you want to use that event and access a property called target. Now the event has a bunch of properties and methods on there, and we can use them. So what we want to do is we want to access that particular property, the property being target. Now target also has another property within it called value, and that value comes from whatever we type in the input field.
So this part, I feel like he explained it like a little bit, not as deep as I wanted to. It's confusing because which event is this targeting? Like, because what you are going to write is add event listener, right? And then we listen for a key up. So basically the input of the user, and then you do function, and then you open bracket event. This part, and then you do something like equal to event dot target dot value. Like, this part is a little bit confusing. This is an argument now. It's still parameters. It's an argument now, right? So this event is basically, it is confusing. Parameters and argument are quite confusing.
You have the event.target.value. I want you to console.log out the username, what you just assigned to the event.target.value. Once you've done that, just take a look as to, well, what you type in there. So if we're going to type in here, I'll type Carl. Well, in this particular case, I want you to type it with the first letter being a capital letter. And the reason for that is because further on in the objectives, we want to use a method that lives on the value called toLowerCase. Now, when we use lowercase, it's going to affect this.
Yeah, this part easy.
The value being whatever we type in. Once we've done that, we do want to go ahead and use toLowerCase. So I'm going to leave you for a few seconds. Feel free to yes. So great job with it. So what I'm going to do next. And I'm going to give you an event, and on this event there's a bunch of properties and values that you can access to basically, well, do whatever you like with them. If you want to get the value out of the input field, go ahead and do that, and that's the one we're focusing on right now. So if we click event
in JavaScript, oh, so it's basically listen for key up. Alright. Event. An HTML event. And when JavaScript is used and react to those event. Alright. So it's basically a function. Now this is like a run away.
And then we got a little tab here, name equals event.target.value. We can console.log that out, and we can see what it gives us. So if I pull up the little tab, that's what we have in our index.html. So this is one thing I want you to pay close attention to right now. So when we get the function or pass the function in, this is basically going to say, okay, once someone does the key up, this is what I'm going to do next. And I'm going to give you an event, and on this event there's a bunch of properties and values that you can access to basically, well, do whatever you like with them. If you want to get the value out of the input field, go ahead and do that, and that's the one we're focusing on right now. So if we click
interesting.
Username equals event.target.value. We can console.log that out.
See, this part is it could be explained better. I don't. Still confusing about this part. Why he put it in function as a parameter? If we pass in this parameters in this function, and then let username equal this event, this parameters. Now it's an argument. Now it's an argument. Dot target dot value. So we basically define the target of this event, and then the value of this as well. Confusing to be safe.
I can see what it gives us. So if I pull up the little tab here and then I type my name in here, we see we get Carl, and we get it in both lower and uppercase. We get the target, and then you get the target, so the input. So that's great. So we'll put it back to value.
Oh.
Input event. Fantastic. We can put that lower and uppercase for the first letter. So that's great. And what happens if we just console.log the event out? So you get a key.
Oh, so it's listening for the keyboard, for the keyboard. Right, I see. Right, event username equal event. Basically listening for the key up. So now when there's anything is put into the input, it show up. Okay.
Event. Fantastic. We can put that back to target. Let's see what we get for target. And then you
Good.
So that's great. So if we put it back to value, we can see if we type in, we get the first letter uppercase.
I see.
What we do is we do want to just take a quick look at the objectives again. So now that we have looped over all the names from the DOM, which is essentially just a list of list items, and we can just once more take a quick look, you'll see we have all the list items. We grab these by the class name of class, and then we get the text content, which is all the names. So going over the loop, we can pull out the current name by its value, being the text content, and then we put it to lower string, at least lowercase, so that when we do a comparison, we're checking two names are exactly the same. So in this task, I'm going to be introducing something fairly new within JavaScript. Now it has been around a little time, but browsers have only fully started supporting this particular method. This method is called includes. Now the reason I like includes is because it just makes sense from an imperative naming convention. So what we want to do is we want to create a conditional, so an if statement, to say if our current name includes the user's search query, we have a match. So if you type Carl and that being your search query, we already have like a box of names, and we're going into that box and saying, does this box include the user's search query? If it does, we want to change the style to display below. If it doesn't, we want to change the style on all the other. So now that we have looped over all the names from the DOM, essentially just a list of list items, and we can just once more take a quick look. You'll see we have all the list items. We grab these by the class name of class, and then we get the text content, which is all the names. So going over all the names from the DOM, which is essentially just a list of list items, and we can just once more take a quick look. You'll see we have all the list items. We grab these by the class name of class. So now that we have looped over all the names from the DOM, which is essentially just a list of list items, and we can just once more take a quick look. You'll see we have all the list items. We grab these by the class name of class, and then we get the text content, which is all the names. So going over the loop, we can pull out the current name by its value, being the text content, and then we put it to lower string, or at least lowercase, so that when we do a comparison, we're checking two names are exactly the same. So in this task, I'm going to be introducing something fairly new within JavaScript. Now it has been around a little time, but browsers have only fully started supporting this particular method. This method is called includes. Now the reason I like includes is because it just makes sense from
from an imperative naming convention. So what we want to do is we want to create a conditional, so an if statement to say, if our current name includes the user's search query, we have a match. So if you type Carl and that being your search query, we already have like a box of names, and we're going into that box and saying, does this box include the user's search query? If it does, we want to change the style to display below. If it doesn't, we want to change the style on all the other elements within that box that don't match Carl, the search query, to none. So that's the task, and I put a little helper here to describe as a reference to go back if you're doing this task and you feel like you forgot how includes works. Well, includes is just a method that basically says, does one string being in this case search query, is that found in the box? So the box could either be an array, but in our case, when we go into that box, we're individually checking within the box to check against the names. So we're not checking an array here, we're checking a string value. So that's when we're going over the for loop. So what we're doing is, we're saying the current name, does this match within the user search query? And if it does, we want to update the UI and just display that one element. Of course, you can have two elements if you did KA in this case, because we have Carl and Katie. So go ahead, give that a shot, and I'll be back shortly. Make sure to pause the video, and good luck.
Right, so what do we do here? Comparing the search query versus DOM name. So we run a loop inside this. Right, const current name. Let's log out all current name. So right here, because I typed in 3 times, so there's 3 loops to do. Do I put it in? Where should it conditional? Conditional should be if current name is equal to if current name equal or names DOM collection. Then it's going to return true, set the display style on to be block elements. So all names. How do I set this display style? How to style in JavaScript. I'm just not sure if it's gonna be this display. Style display equal block, right? Comments. Then it's going to be, oh, it's supposed to be counters as well. If our conditional statement false, else if else, we have no match. So set the display style to none. None. Sorry, I go. New method include for objective 1. The include method determines whether one string may be found within another string. Where could it be? If current name 3 equal, let's run this. Call unknown errors. That's good. Okay, conditional check if current name is equal to the user search query. User search query. Oh, what am I doing? Search query. Use method include in Javascript and so oh, so we don't do this. We dot include, and then it's going to be search query, isn't it? Run. Carl, why is it still errors?
Hopefully you've got includes the users if found somewhat of a name or string match. So we're going to say all names, because this is in the objectives to say, look, if we found them, we need.
Alright, let me watch this. Answer yes, it's the same. Current includes search query. I basically did it. The part is confusing. Is it style.display? We are going to the heartland.
Display style error. Perfect. So pay close attention.
I basically did the same thing.
So all names dom collection, and then we pass the count query. Go here and we can type in Carl, and you can see we get a result. If I type
what? Yeah, let's try this. Let's say user errors. Where can I find the errors, guys? Guys, I need help. Jesus. Search query, current name, dot includes. Basically did the same things. Why is... I hate this unknown errors. Where can this unknown error be? Guys, where can this unknown error be? Oh. I have to put it in bracket. This is use console. Yeah, my console is here, but it say unknown errors. Quite hard to figure it out. Now I see why. you have to put it in here. CSS is complex. You have to put it in a quotation mark. And let's run this. Call. Oh, searching now. Searching now. Call. Katie. Katie. Oh. Ooh. It's actually nice. It's actually nice.
We like search for usernames. So great job. We've covered a lot. We've looked at event string compiler list. So fantastic job. You have done brilliantly, and you.
Oh, this is a good project, right? So what do? We first get the search input. We take out the search input from the HTML, and then we state it into our JavaScript. We add an event listeners to that search input for key up. So this key up, whenever the user click anything on the keyboard, is going to trigger this add event listeners. So function event is also going to this key up. It's a parameter. I'm not sure about this function event stuff. Is this event is going to be parameters, because parameter usually means nothing. It's just a variable. And then we let search query equal to event. We trigger this event from this function. So anything that a person click into here, do anything on the keyboard, event is going to catch it. And target, the target of the event. The target is going to be like the words, values, stuff that the person typed in. I'm not sure. But to lowercase is basically just to make the text lowercase. Let our name DOM collection equal to basic stuff. We run through the loops so that the current name equal to index of the name of the DOM collection. This is the index 1234 01234. Pretty nice. Dot text content. It display into the make it all lowercase. Okay, interesting. This is a nice project. I will save it.
Have essentially created your own live search. Welcome to the series where we're going to be building a carousel from scratch, and we're only going to be using the bare minimum of JavaScript. We're not going to be pulling in any library. We're going to be doing this all by ourselves. There's no need to pull in libraries. You'll see lots of companies pulling in libraries just for a carousel, and I want to teach you how to build one because it's super important skill. So let's go ahead and look at what we'll be building. So here it is on the right. We have a carousel with the Joker image. We have the previous and the next button. We essentially want to attach listeners to these buttons. So if a user clicks previous or if a user clicks next, we want to fire an action. We want to say, okay, in our JavaScript, when a user makes an action, we have to change the position of the carousel. So we haven't got too many extraordinary features in here. We don't have dancing ducks or flying cows. We just have a previous and next button, and this is the base that you want for a seamless carousel. Few things to think about. We have to have a strong HTML based structure for the carousel. So we may have a carousel as a parent div. Furthermore, we may have carousel items to represent where the images or the carousel content is going to sit. We have to make sure our carousel buttons are accessible, because if look here, we're using the left and right arrow, and it doesn't represent much to a screen reader. So if someone has a disability and the screen reader gets to these buttons, it's going to out loud say either arrow or right arrow, whatever it may be. We want to be descriptive, so we're going to use area labels, and what we're going to say is for the previous one and the next one, this one's going to say previous slide and this one's going to say next slide. So we want to style the carousel too. Most of the styling comes from the buttons, so feel free to go crazy with that and get some nice looking buttons. You want to think about how we're going to use JavaScript to grab all the carousel items and how you're going to attach event listeners to the next and the previous buttons. So when we attach an event listener to these buttons and the user clicks previous or next, we fire off an action. We have to also keep in mind that we want to be aware of the position that the carousel is in. So if they're on position 3, which may be the last slide, we want to rotate them background to the first slide, because you don't want to try access a slide that doesn't exist, because that will throw an error. And lastly, we want smooth transitions between our carousel slides. We want some
base HTML structure for carousel, such as carousel, item, carousel, buttons, making sure our carousel is accessible, styling the carousel, grabbing all carousel items and attaching event listener to the previous, next and previous photo, changing slide position, smooth transition between carousel,
nice
slides,
transition in between the slides, fading in, fading out. So we're going to be looking at CSS keyframes for that. And this is what we're building. This is a GIF or GIF, depending on how you call it. And I'm clicking fairly quick on here, clicking the next button, I'm clicking the previous button, and I'm just switching between the slides, and we've got some nice transitions. And I really like it. It's very simple, and it's using all the elements of web development, HTML, CSS. And this is the transition. So if I click on next on the Joker image, I'll get taken to Baby Driver, and then I'll get taken to the last image. And then if I click on the next button on the last slide, I get rotated background to Joker. So if I'm on Joker, which is one slide here, being the first slide, if I click previous, I get taken to this one. But generally speaking, people click next on a carousel. If someone happens to click next here and there's no more carousel items, we go back round. So that's it. That's what we're going to be building. A nice, seamless, start building the carousel. Welcome to the first screencast where we're going to be getting our hands dirty creating a carousel. So I have put out some instructions here. They will get you to the endpoint of creating a base HTML structure for our carousel. So to begin, you'll have to create a carousel div, then you'll have to create some carousel items, which will just be divs, and inside those carousel items you will have images. The images have been provided on the left, so feel free to check those out or switch them out to your own images. We will need some buttons, so we can go previous and next for our carousel. And you will have to add a ARIA label. Now, if you haven't come across a ARIA label before, the reason we're adding these to the buttons is because for the previous and the next buttons, we're going to be using arrows. So an arrow pointing left and an arrow pointing right. Now, screen readers aren't great at saying these to a user who may be using a screen reader. So we want to provide an ARIA label, which basically says, if you're on a screen reader, use or say this text as opposed to the text within inside the button. So go ahead, give this a go. Feel free to pause this screencast and
create a parent div for a cursor. So we div if he in the jiffy. ID. It should be a class, right? Shut up. Class, this is going to be carousel. And then we do this. Why is this my computer so slow? Alright, then we do this. Create 3 divs of cursor called cursor items. Div class cursor items. If you goodbye. Right. Add image 2, 3 to each cursor item div with image screen being image 1. Make sure to increment the image, and for each div okay. src copy this in. Now we do this. Do this. Make sure to increment the image number for each div. Oh, so like 2, 3. So item 1, right? 2, 3. All image are provided in the folders. Okay, once you have parent div of carousel and 3 with image inside, make sure new div called carousel action, which sit inside carousel and not within the carousel buttons. Alright, easy. Div, we are basically listening for task. We are a robot now. We are a robot and we're listening for task. Reading and listening for task. Cursor action, I'm assuming is for the when I switch. Add 2 buttons inside cursor action. Alright. Button is going to have a cursor buttons next. The first one is previous, right? Class. I love class. Buttons. Class. Then we do this next, right? Next. Let's try, let's see it. Okay, we have it. Right, the content for the previous buttons will be okay. Computer, stop lagging. Why is this not working? Okay, we have it. We have it, guys. So, second being cursor button next. The content will be next. Yes. Arrow that show left and right. on those buttons, previous, next, add area labels. So that screen reader can read the text out loud to the user. What is this? Never heard of it. Let me check this. Like an alt text, right? Call it alt text. Just call it alt text. Oh. This is going to be previous image. We add those stuff just to speak, just for our computer to speak it, to understand it. Add cursor item visible to the first cursor items.
Chip away at this task and I'll. So as the risk was these images just by we are on basically this is just going to seeing as though that is and that's so that's great out creating a carousel is this thing carousel item visible and
oh, so we basically just add that into this. Cut this. Alright, we copy this first and then we Control D. Then we go boop boop. Yes. Run this. Magic.
It mentions within the instruction. That's what generally happens.